Thanks for joining us today on The Perfect X. My name is Sherry, and this is my co host, Ben.
Hi, everyone. This is Ben.
And today we are talking about boundaries.
Boundaries.
Boundaries. That's a good one. I can't wait. I was
Yeah.
actually excited for this one.
So you're not excited for the other ones?
I never was. No, I'm
Okay.
joking. This is the first and only one. 13 episodes in, I'm finally a little excited. How's your
How are?
weekend?
It was good. I went to watch Oppenheimer.
Is
Um,
it good?
it's good. It
There's such a
was,
buzz around it.
yeah, it was. I really liked it. I mean, it's really interesting, but the movie theater was extremely loud. It's a lot of loud noises, so just
I,
be aware of
you
that.
sound so old.
No, no, no. It really, like, I don't mind. I don't mind loud movies, but this one, it's extremely loud. Like it is. Like I saw
Uh-huh.
something that apparently, because right now, like Barbie and Oppenheimer are like going crazy, right? But like people from Barbie could hear and feel the vibration on the
Uh-huh,
other.
uh-huh.
So
Like
it's like crazy loud and like it shakes. It's crazy. Yeah.
you're like totally defending the fact that you're almost 40. You're like, it's not me, the Barbie people. The
No, no, no.
Barbie.
I'm already 40.
Wait, that's
Um,
right. I don't know why I always
yeah.
think you're turning 40.
No,
But
I'm
okay,
40.
well, you're old. And now
Yeah.
you're defending these 13-year-olds that were probably watching Barbie. You're using them to defend yourself. You're like, oh,
No,
the
no, no. I'm not
13-year-olds at
defending anyone.
Barbie.
No, I'm not defending anyone. It was just so the other thing is that I was with a friend and she had a bit of a headache and it started turning like
Oh
really
my
bad.
God,
And I'm
this
like,
is
do you
just,
want?
is she also 40?
No, she's your age.
So she's old. I'm fucking old. You're old.
Yeah, I know, but she's not 40. But no, but yeah, but still, it's like it was a bit on the uncomfortable side.
Uh-huh.
But it's a really
Any
good movie.
anything else? Was it hard getting into your seat? Did your back hurt? Was it hard to get up?
There was no place where to put my cane and my stroller.
Your stroller, you
Wow.
mean your wheelchair.
Well, no, or what is it? The little the one
Walker.
that the walker. That's what I was looking
I
for.
see. I see. I
Yeah,
see.
there wasn't any place where I could put my walker, so
Well, I'm so sorry
yeah.
that the movie was difficult on your eardrums. I hope
Okay,
you have
when you go, wait, hopefully you go and watch it, and then we'll talk about it.
I don't think I'm gonna see. I mean, I'm not too sure. It's not one of the theater type movies I think I'll see. It's not like something I'm dying to see. I'll see it when it's like on Netflix or something. It's not my
Oh
to go
no,
to.
no, you
But
have to go to the movies.
I have a secret, and I never like to say this because I never like to admit to being scared of anything. Like I walked my dog at like 4 in the morning on the streets, like no big deal in LA, thinking I'm all gangster. But I hate going to movie theaters in America. I'm so scared.
Why?
Because you guys have like shit that goes down. Like
Wait,
just
you
like
guys?
well,
I'm
Americans,
okay.
America, not Americans. I shouldn't say you guys, but like when I say you guys, I mean like America. Like
Okay.
in America, like just I think in the last few weeks, like TMZ reported, and yes, that's where I get my news, but they reported that there was like a fight over a seat and a shooting once over a seat, like just in like the last month. Like I'm never good at timelines, so it was like sometime between the last 2 months, and then I don't remember if I had moved to America yet or this is before I moved, but remember when the Joker came out and then that whole ordeal
Yeah.
happened? I was like, fuck no, there is no movie that I want to see worth it. So I get really anxious. I go like maybe in all the 10
So
years I've been here.
you don't go to
I
malls, you don't go to
I
grocery
do
stores,
okay,
you
but
don't go to
okay, so like grocery stores I don't know anything of, but
oh,
malls get me a little anxious. I usually go to the mall during the day, like during like when everyone's like really busy. Like when sorry, it's not really busy. Yeah, I'm a little bit weird about those things. I try not to think about it. Well, and I'm not gonna lie, the mall I try to go, earlier times, but I do go to the mall a lot. So I guess it's kind of like risk and reward. Like to me, like there's no movie worth seeing it that much, you know? Like it's really weird. Like, or there's concerts. I'm not a big fan of going to concerts. Like I just listen, I didn't grow up around guns. Like all of this gun stuff to me is like a new thing. Like I'm not
Well,
that
I'm
big
from
on it.
Mexico. I didn't grow up with guns either. And
There's the
in my family.
cartel. I mean, there's
Yeah,
still something.
but it's not my family. It's not like, oh yeah, and my cousin is
But
no.
I mean, so like Mexico is super safe. Like I grew up in a city where like you don't. I didn't like ever remember our doors being locked. Everyone had a key to our house, anyways. Like it wasn't like I'm a little sheltered. I'm a little sheltered. But
Okay.
it was honestly like I used to come to the movies a lot because my sisters lived in the States for many years, like 10 years before I did, and I had no problem. After the Joker situation, I always it's not that I don't go, but I'm not a big fan of going. You know what I mean? Like after that thing happened with the Joker thing, and those are the type of movies I like. Like I like intense thriller movies. So I feel like that's where those type of situations could happen. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be worried to go see Barbie. Like it's not on the top of my but it's usually that type of movie that brings out a certain type of crowd with a certain possibility. So I am careful.
This is a historical movie. I mean, it's based on
I know, but there's a lot of like racial aspects of it, and you never know. Like people are just nuts nowadays. Like they just go out of their
people are
like.
nuts everywhere. So
I know. I'm just saying. I'll watch it when it comes on Netflix. like,
okay,
Let me put it this way. I've seen every single movie of Fast and the Furious in theater. I'm a huge Fast and Furious junkie. I know nobody likes it anymore. But after the ninth one, which was the first one that I wasn't a fan of, with the whole, they went into space, I was like, okay, now you fucked up. I believed everything else. I believed you fly in your car like 50 through, through like glass buildings. I believed all of it. Okay. I believe that you guys were the group that can penetrate every single impossible situation, planes, going over the undetected in the satellite. I believed it all. But once they went into space, I was like, okay, I will no longer risk it in a theater. I'll
I
see you on Netflix.
I don't think I even watched the third of
Oh,
Fast and
really?
Furious.
Oh, it's so
Yeah,
good. It's so good. I'm such a
no, it's
diehard
not.
Fast. I know. But anyways, but that's good. I'm glad you saw it. And plus, if you're old and you're complaining about the noise, I'm probably gonna complain. Like,
Yeah,
I'll see it at home.
I really wish you could go to so you could see how loud it was. I mean, I don't know what other if other movie theaters are doing that, but really, it was extremely loud. But it was really good.
It's good
Um,
to hear that you liked it though. I heard it's really
yeah,
good.
yeah, I like all those historical movies, and yeah, it's cool. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so I did that, and on Friday I went to have some drinks, and then I ended up in a country bar,
A country
or
bar.
yeah, like a country club, yeah,
Huh. Do you
Mavericks. And no, I don't dance.
okay.
I like I know how to dance, but not two step or no. I'm not a country. I don't like country music that much, but yeah,
That sounds
I know
fun.
how to dance salsa and stuff like that.
I've
Yeah.
always
What
never
did you
danced
do?
that. Friday we went to the bar. It was a lot of fun. We went to like a usual spot and we met like so many fun people. It was a lot of fun, like kind of thing. And then Saturday we went to a comedy show and then another bar that was a lot of fun too. The comedy show was like okay, it wasn't the best comedy show, but it was a
Who
bunch of
was it?
like well, I can't remember
Oh,
their names. It was like a really like up and like people who weren't even up and coming. Like it was like makeshift, like
okay.
inside of a gym. Like the tickets were only $25. Like it was like all these like wannabe comics. But the last two were
Okay.
super funny. And the
Oh, that's
headliner
good.
guy was really funny. It was good. It wasn't like the best comedy show I saw, but it was pretty good. And then we went to like a bar after. I mean, it was so casual. I was in overalls for God's sakes. Like, you know.
Yeah.
So but it was a lot of fun. And then yesterday I just hung out at home waiting for today.
Nice.
All day waiting for
All
today.
day to talk about boundaries.
Talk about boundaries. All
Okay.
right, so let's get into it. So
Yeah.
I wanted to start with saying that there was a saying that I read which made me want to do this whole boundary things. And it was really interesting. So I'll read it and then you tell me what you think about it. So the saying says, you can't be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. And that really hit home for me. So,
You
I
can't
mean,
be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself.
so like a people pleaser,
Yeah,
someone
yeah, yeah.
who constantly, and I, to me, that really hit home because I am a people pleaser, like as much as my jokes to come off not that way, but it's true. Like and I really hit home for me, but I'll explain after you tell me what you think.
No, I'm still trying to understand. You can't be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. So you need,
For me, what it meant, like I
yeah.
always say yes to everybody and always say yes to things I really don't want to do because it's easier. I feel like in the moment, and it's not true because long run it's not easier, but in the moment, I feel like it's easier to just say yes and do what that person needs me to do, even though I'm not comfortable and I don't want to do it,
Hmm.
over having them be mad at me and not doing it, right? And then in the reality in that moment, you feel like you're doing what's simple. You're not doing any dealing with any confrontation and you're not displeasing anybody. You're doing what they're requesting. But the reality is in the long run, you are constantly putting yourself and your needs last and that will cause you to resent that person. Like I
Yeah.
have that habit. Like I find that I'll be mad at someone for something that they didn't really do today, for something for like the last 10 times I've said yes to and I wanted to say no to. So
But you're really
now
mad at yourself,
I'm mad
but
at myself and I'm mad
you're
at them.
taking, yeah, but you're taking it off on them, but it's your
That's true.
fault.
Yeah, it is true. It
Yeah,
is
yeah,
true.
yeah.
100%. You're right. You're right. Like
Yeah.
I am mad at myself and I'm mad at that. Like I'm being mad at them for something that they're not even at fault. You're right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
but exactly. So you're nothing to yourself. And the reality
Yeah.
is, by saying yes all the time, you're making yourself not feel important to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So nothing to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think in relationships, especially in the beginning, we're really big on that. You just like, you'll do everything that that person wants because you really just want things to work out and be smooth. And those lack of boundaries, I think, is what causes a lot of issues in the long run. Because imagine like you take on sports you don't want to do, you go to a lot of events you don't want to go, which is, of course, there's some compromise, or like you're constantly doing things maybe that you don't want to do. And then once that person pisses you off, you're like, well, excuse me, I
Yeah.
feel like I've done so much. And they don't know that because you're saying yes. You're trying to be everything to them, right?
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, like what we were just talking about, movies. I mean, if I didn't know that you didn't like movies, I would be like, hey, let's go watch Oppenheimer, even though our ears are gonna burst.
Split.
But but you're like, yeah, let's go because we're barely dating or we're just starting. But then at the end, you're gonna be like, I don't like it, and then it's gonna change because I'm gonna be like, but you used to go, we used to go to movies. Now what changing, you know? And so
Hmm.
then it's gonna be also awkward for me.
Or I could go and be just mad at you the whole time, like, oh, I don't want to be here. I'm uncomfortable. I go to
Yeah.
movie theaters. Like, I just saw Air in the theaters. And as soon as I saw it, the first thing that crossed my mind was, and the funny thing is, I wanted to go because I thought it'd be something casual and cute to do with the guy that I was interested in. And I felt like he was trying to plan these really elaborate dates. So I did something that was uncomfortable to myself in order to come off a little, because I was like, oh, like we can be casual. Like, you don't always need to impress me. I was trying to show the other side. And we
Hmm.
went to go see Air. And what's funny is that in that moment, I thought, I really liked Air. I thought it was a great movie, but I was like, this
Yeah.
wasn't a movie I would have saw in theaters. Do you know what I'm saying? Like for me to be that uncomfortable to go to a movie theater, and I'm not like a psycho. I'm not like the whole time sitting there thinking about it, but it does cross my mind. So
Yeah.
I thought about it. Like I imagine I had stayed with that guy and we hung out more, and he constantly now wants to go to theaters. And I'm not expressing myself. I'm not putting that boundary there. And then I'm like resenting him every time I'm going, getting a little bit anxious. Like I just get anxiety going. So imagine I take it out on him and he doesn't realize why, because I've set a precedent of something else. There was no
Yeah.
boundary. There was no expressing myself and the truth, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, so that, I mean, I think it's really great. And what's really interesting is I grew up in a culture, we have something called taro, which means like you, I mean, there's always like jokes about it. I don't know the best way to explain it. I'm not good at explaining these things, but pretty much it's like you're dying of thirst, you're in someone's house and they're like, do you want a glass of water? And that person's or that person says to you, "Do you want a glass of wine?" You're always supposed to say no. You're never supposed to be a burden or of any sort. That's in our culture, in the Persian culture. And so you say no. But meanwhile, you're dying of thirst, and something as simple as just getting a glass of water, you don't have the balls to ask. So you're constantly taro-offing. So when that person says, like, do you want to drive me, like in LA, driving to LAX is like a big deal. Imagine that person's like, oh,
Yeah.
do you want to drive me at LAX? You're like, any normal person that lives in LA knows that going to and from the airport here is a fucking, like, a headache. It's like 2 hours each way. So you don't ask
Yeah.
people. But like when I first moved to LA, like people would ask me when they'd visit, they'd like, can you pick me up? And I'd say yes. And I resented them. I taught I instead of telling them the truth, I resented them the whole 2 hour drive there and the 2 hour drive back. That whole 4 hour journey, I was hating their fucking guts. But because I taught off, I said yes, because even though I really wanted to say no, I didn't want to burden them with the difficulty of getting an Uber. You know, that's what Taro is. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
that's really interesting.
it's like always making yourself uncomfortable as long as you're not doing something uncomfortable towards someone else. And
Yeah.
that's in our culture. And it's really great when you do it with somebody else who knows it. Like when I'm around very Persian people, well, they also talk. So they're never asking me to drive them to the airport. I'm never asking them. You know, they know when I say no to a glass of water, they just go and get it because they know that I actually really want it. It's very easy. But the reality is not everyone's Persian. So this constant interaction is very difficult, you know?
Yeah.
But I think boundaries in relationships, I mean, all relationships are so important. And I think in a dating relationship, it can almost make or break a situation, if you ask me. It's
Yeah.
either,
Yeah, no, no, of course, I'm with you. I mean, because yeah, I mean, it's and it kind of falls into sometimes it's like your own or your self-respect, you know, like
well, that's the
you,
part of you that gets mad, right? That's
yeah,
the part
yeah,
of,
of
it's the
course, yeah,
ego that gets mad because you're like, oh my God, I'm never being respected. But because you're
yeah,
just assuming that person to be a mind reader.
yeah, correct.
I mean, how are you like in relationship? Like, I'm learning boundaries. I'm 37 years old. I'm just fucking learning boundaries, and it's the hardest thing to learn. Like, and I mean them across the board, like in relationships with men, with friendships, like girls. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm learning this boundary, and it's so hard. Like, because if you're so used to being a people pleaser and saying yes all the time, saying no is the most guilty feeling. Like, even for the
It's
simplest
terrible.
things, it's the
Yeah.
worst feeling. I mean, what are you like? Are you
Oh, I'm a people pleaser. I mean, and for me saying no to something, it's so hard. And that's why sometimes I'm overbooked. Like sometimes I'm like, hey, I have something to do in the morning and then something in the afternoon, and then also I have a party at night, you know, because
Mhm.
I don't want to say no to anything. And so I'm just like, yeah, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And the next day I'm like super tired.
It's crazy, right? Like, because you're not used to saying no, because like
Yeah.
that, and then you're exhausted the next day, and you're frustrated. Like, oh fuck, I didn't even want to be at like two of those events, but you didn't have the balls to say no. And
Yeah.
I think it really piles up. Like one thing I'm learning at 37, like I used to believe like, oh no, if you care about someone, you just do it. It's okay. And then I realized that like as I got older, I'm like, I actually have like a little bit of resentment towards like certain people because certain people they constantly ask things. And I realized that like also in my past relationships, like guys I've dated, a lot of the times I ended like a couple weeks in or whatever because I felt a boundary was not respected. But how can someone respect the boundaries that aren't even implemented, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't have the balls to implement them, so they don't know what my boundaries are and they're just living life,
Yeah.
right?
And we're not saying say no if you're in a relationship, always say no. Yeah, no, just sometimes you have to just like be able to say no because you really are not gonna like it or you're not gonna enjoy that time and it's gonna become even worse.
Well, that's another
And
thing is receiving the boundary.
yeah,
That's another thing. You're totally right. Receiving the boundary. And that's actually just as hard. Like, also, you have to understand, like, to have a healthy relationship, you have to express your boundaries, but receive someone else's boundary as well. Like, a lot of times when someone shares a boundary with you, people take it as a personal dig when it's really not
yeah,
a personal dig. It's just them trying to keep things in a healthy medium by sharing what they're comfortable with. It's not
yeah,
specific to you. But unfortunately, receiving boundaries are just as hard as giving them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not for everyone. I think it's hard for people like you and me, that
People pleasers.
yeah, that we're like, oh, I'd rather do this than be they feel like I feel like we think that they're gonna think that we're assholes if we don't do it.
Yeah.
And
What
so,
what about receiving it though? I mean, like what do you feel like if someone says to you like, "Hey Ben, like next time I'd appreciate if you didn't ask me to go to the theater. I'm not comfortable going." How would you feel about that? Like that's
oh,
a boundary I'm setting foot.
no, I mean, I prefer that because then
Yeah.
I know, yeah, I mean, of course. And I mean, I think that's the communication part of it, of being like, just don't like doing that. This just makes me feel uncomfortable. And maybe I'll be like, she's crazy, like she doesn't want to go to it. But then I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you don't want to go, I totally understand it.
See, and I guess that one's not as personal. So let me make it like this. So like for me, I know that I cross the boundary with jokes. Like to me, I don't make fun of things that are actually true, like, but they're more comical, but it's a little like
Hmm.
not insulting. Like, I'm never like, I will constantly talk about divorce with my girlfriend who has an amazing husband. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because it's only funny because obviously he's such a good husband that we'd have to be an idiot. She'd have to be a complete idiot to leave him. So it's only funny to make those divorce jokes, you know? I wouldn't, if he was a shitty husband, I wouldn't be making that joke. But it is a boundary crossing joke. And luckily she receives it, because she
yeah,
knows that she also knows her husband's amazing. So obviously the joke is just that he's so amazing. So talking about divorcing him is just funny. But let's say one day she says to me, actually, I don't appreciate those jokes anymore. Luckily in 9 years she hasn't. But let's say that, right? So she said it to
maybe if
me.
she listens to the show, she's gonna be like, hey, by the way. But yeah,
FYI,
continue.
actually, now that we've opened the door, but no, she's got such a good sense of humor. But let's say she was like, "Hey, I have to put away my ego," which is hard for people to do, and
Yeah,
understand that her putting that boundary isn't her thinking I'm this fucking asshole who's been making this joke for all the time. It's just that she's no longer comfortable, and she has the right, and I have to receive that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, but people tend to make it like personal. Like, I could be like, "Oh my god." Like what? Like now she doesn't like my joke. Like what? She doesn't think I'm funny, or like that's the problem. I think like just as bad as a society as we are at creating boundaries, although this new generation is all about boundaries, but our generation is bad at creating them. We're also not very good at receiving them because we always put our ego into it. And that's
yeah,
what we have to take out of it. Like, maybe that's just not funny to her anymore. And so I have to accept it. It's not a personal dig to me, you
yeah,
know, that's one thing we have to learn. And in relationships, that's really hard. Like, I know that I was dating someone who was always late, always, always late. And for me, a huge sign of disrespect is someone being late. So there had to be a respectful boundary there. And I know I couldn't be with him because I was starting to resent him. So I either had to share my boundary or I had to move on. So
yeah,
I couldn't be with someone who's just constantly 30, 40 minutes late because I really couldn't. It's like such a disrespect for me. And so I shared my boundary and we had to find a medium. Like I'm not telling you go out of your way. I'm telling you, like, of course, I understand that there are going to be times you're going to be late, but you need to share that way earlier. It doesn't like you get
yeah,
in your car and you check traffic. Well, this is LA. Everybody knows like you should check traffic an hour before you make plans, before you're supposed to leave the door because it can change at any point.
yeah,
And he went out of his way to do that. Now, sometimes that did it wasn't it's like an hour ago it said 40 minutes and then like as he's leaving 40 minutes it was actually 50 minutes, so I had to understand that respect and receive that he's going to try his best, and vice versa, I he had to go out of his way to be more time efficient, right? We
yeah,
had to share our boundaries, but imagine he took it as me just telling him what to do. He had to receive that it's about something that I was feeling disrespected of, not me trying to control him. So you have to receive the boundary, right?
yeah, yeah. No, no, I totally agree with you. And yeah,
And Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Boundaries are hard, man, but they make all the difference. I think my healthiest friendships and relationships are ones that we communicated them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that's again going back to communicating that and respecting yourself and being respectful of the other person. And sometimes, like you say, like it could be a small thing, but it makes a huge difference, you know? Because people that are always late, they're like they've always been late and they're like "Ah, whatever, you know? But
Mhm.
you're putting your effort, and yeah,
Well,
I've
it's
been
interesting
there.
you say it's the small thing because I actually think it's the small things that can make or break a relationship because we don't notice that. Like, I don't think as a society we talk about it enough. Like, we always brush off the small things. Like, and I was like that. I was always like, I always wanted to come off as this like super easygoing, and I was really easygoing up until like a few years ago. I was super
When I
easygoing, and I was
met
like,
you.
up until like 2 months ago when I met you. But like, but actually, I started to realize like because I was so bad at communicating, but it wasn't the certain things that bothered me. It's actually the little things that pile up. It's the
Yeah,
little things that make us feel respected or disrespected, and we don't value them as much as we should. Like, we need to actually value the small things we do for one another because those are the ones that we do often. Like, you're more likely to be late than to constantly send someone flowers. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's actually that little gesture that can pile up and make someone either grateful or resentful.
yeah,
It's really the little things.
yeah.
What would you do if someone kept disrespecting your boundary? Like, let's say you shared a boundary. Like, Sherry, I don't like your jokes. Please, or like certain jokes. Please stop
Yeah,
making this joke. What what would you do? And we've communicated about it. We've come to a conclusion, but I
yeah.
keep on making that specific joke.
I mean, I would stop doing this podcast with you. No,
Is
I
there a
mean,
boundary?
yeah. Well, no, I think I think I would break up with that person because I mean, it's being respectful, and if she doesn't change while it still has not like because when you're setting those it has not piled up like you were saying, you know, like those it could be a small thing, it could be a big thing, but a lot of times is the piling up of it. And if
Mhm.
you don't bring it up, and or if you bring it up and they're like yeah sure, that's red flag, that's disrespectful, and I mean I don't want to be with you if you are not like respecting me, you know?
It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think I
What
would
would you
too.
do?
I would too. And I have, like with the guy that was late, I have. Like I communicated with him and I remember he said to me, "Yeah, but there was so much traffic." And I was like, "Yeah, there's also was so much traffic on my end." Like, so I communicated with him. He always had an excuse. We I try to gave it like a little bit more time, but I did break up with him because I didn't feel that there was anything that he could like I didn't feel that I was being heard, and I did feel that I was just going to become more and more resentful and I was going to be more explosive. And I do remember that he was like, "But we get along so well, how could this be the thing that ends it with you?" And I was like, "Well, that's the same thing. If we get along so well, how come you couldn't go out of your way to also respect something that you feel is so small?" you
Yeah,
know because it wasn't so small to me. If it's that insignificant to you, then why can't you just adjust a little bit? But then
yeah,
that also comes to the category, like if that person had turned around and said like I'm okay with like certain I cross every boundary with jokes and I can't help myself. I need it. I like to push the button. I want to hit the glass off the table, watch it shatter. I am that person. I will say everything I'm not supposed to say. And so I can't be with someone who doesn't have that type of sense of humor. But if that person turned around and said like I am okay with all the jokes you make. There's just two jokes I don't like, which I recently had. They're like, these two jokes I don't want to be had. And I was like, great. And I went out of my way to make sure to never, ever make jokes about those two things again. And that was respecting that individual's boundary because that is needed. He wasn't asking me to completely stop joking, but
yeah,
to respect those two jokes. Given if he had asked me to completely stop joking, I know that that is what makes me like breathe and live in my existence. I would have to end that too because I know I couldn't respect a boundary like that. So I guess you have to really decide like what boundaries, can you respect? And if you can't, then it's best to let it go. Because if I became someone who doesn't cross those boundaries and make or like cross those lines and make those jokes, I wouldn't be myself. You're completely asking me to be somebody else. I
Yeah.
can respect a few, but I can't respect none. So again, that's another thing that you got to consider.
Yeah. I was reading something about boundaries and I found that there's like 7 types of boundaries,
Oh,
and there's time, mental, emotional, material, internal, conversational, and physical.
oh,
And
oh,
so, yeah. And so mental is like I respect your perspective, although I do not agree. And and that's something that I mean a lot of things happen, like, oh, well, I mean I respect you, but it doesn't mean that just because I respect you doesn't mean I need to agree with you. And so
and by
yeah,
respecting, that means you no longer do it, right?
of course, yeah. And
Uh-huh.
and
That's
maybe that could
interesting.
turn into something like, you know what, let's better not have this conversation because it eventually can turn into like I don't know, like a big topic, and it could make you break up or something,
Hmm.
or yeah. And emotional, as much as I want to support you right now, I do not have the emotional capacity. And and how emotionally are you available for the other people or for that person?
That's interesting. That is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
What else is there?
So so there's material, and that's like, I already lent you some money last week, so not again right now. So I mean, and that could be that, oh, you know what, I don't have a job right now, and you're paying for everything for me, and there's gonna be a moment where it's gonna be like, no.
These are interesting. These are like boundary requests, it sounds like things that
Yeah,
people could ask you that you can set boundaries for.
yeah,
Ask from you. Sorry, they could ask from you, and then you decide whether you can or can't.
yeah.
That's really interesting.
uh
All right.
the internal one, I have been social a week, I need the weekend to myself,
Hmm.
you know
That's a good one.
um
That's actually a really good one because people usually get offended when someone doesn't come out.
yeah,
But it seems like, I mean, we have, and I think we learn that more and more today. Like, it's okay for you not to join somebody and take personal time. Whereas before, that wasn't, growing up, that wasn't okay. Like, if you didn't show up to a friend's party or something, it was like so offensive. Do you remember? Like, I was for me at least, like where I grew up.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
So I mean, and it's not bad to say, hey, you know what, that today, or I just, everyone needs time for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and and self reflect on what they did, and just,
Self care.
yeah.
Yeah.
and
Which
and
we really didn't do that before. We didn't know that was a thing. You just kept going till you burnt out.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
what
and
else you
then
got?
and then on Monday you were just all out, because
Miserable too.
yeah. And physical, so it's uh privacy, personal space, and your body. So it's like an example is, I prefer not to hug people I do not know. But another thing is, I know I've know girls and I've dated girls that don't like, what is it called, personal, no, PSA,
Oh,
physical,
PDA,
PDA,
per,
yeah.
PDA. What did that stand for again? Personal, no, physical
No,
displays of affection.
public
Public display.
displays,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Look
And
at us.
so, yeah. And so, like, you know what, when I'm out, I just like to hold hands. I don't want you to like kiss me, I don't want you to like to hug me. And sometimes it's hard for that, because I mean, you sometimes want to like turn around and kiss that person, and she's like, no, I don't want that. And so you also have to respect that, and those are boundaries that you have to set.
Were you able to respect that boundary? Or was that really hard for you?
No, no, no. Of course, I was able to respect it. I mean, and if it was like, if we were by ourselves in a restaurant, it wasn't like that bad. but during a party, and some people do not respect, like, and I'm not gonna be making out in the middle of a party, and I don't do that. I mean, I also don't like that. But sometimes, like, if I want to just slap her ass or something, like she's like walking by and I'm like, give her a little spanking or something. I like doing that, For me, it's a little bit of affection, like, but she's like, no. And I'm like, okay. And
Yeah,
so I
that's actually a
need
really good boundary. I mean, not I don't have that boundary, but that's a really good boundary example,
yeah,
Because that is really, because that's your emotional, like we talked about last, like your love language is that touchy, affectionate playground kind of thing. And
yeah,
she's saying, please don't do that. So you feel like you're not showing the affection you want to show, but at the same time, you have to respect that for her, it's not a thing of affection, it's a thing of disrespect in public.
yeah,
So that's an interesting one. That's a really good boundary example.
yeah. And I mean, and and the person that is touchy touchy, feely feely should not feel bad if they tell you don't do that. Like, you should not feel disrespected. It's just you have to respect the other person. So then I would be like, okay, I get it, and I don't want this to become an issue. So we can be touchy feely when we're alone. It's fine. But if it's outside, I totally understand.
I guess it really comes down to, though, what how much you value certain boundaries, right? Like we all have a lot of boundaries, but it's like, for instance, like maybe with this one you're more okay with, but you're not going to be okay with like them being late. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of finding like it's actually really what interesting what you're saying. Like you have no problem respecting this boundary because as much as you want it, you could understand why she doesn't want it, so you're able to give it to her, right?
Yeah,
And I think though, like when it comes, like we have certain boundaries that we should be able to budge on, and others that it's okay not to budge on. I think that's something we have to understand. Like maybe it would be, I'm a very public, affectionate person too. And I'm not going to, again, not make out, but I am very affectionate when I like somebody. And so it would be really hard for me not to do that, but I could respect that. But I can't respect that person not letting me have any jokes. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I guess it kind of comes to like finding that medium between the relationship and seeing where you can give and take or completely end it, if there's really no give and take.
yeah. So, so yeah. And one thing that I really liked about this article that I was reading is how to set up the boundaries. And first, it says define, identify desired boundary. Then number two would be communicate and say what you need. Then stay simple. So don't over explain. I mean, just why. And then the last one is set consequences. Why is
Ooh,
this important for you?
consequences?
Yeah. So that's why, like, you asked me, like, what if this person kept doing that? Well, we already had this conversation. This is the consequence. I told you I don't want to do this, or I don't want you to be touchy touchy outside, or something like that. But then the
Mm,
consequences, I don't know, breaking up, or
that's true. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, there's obviously a consequence. You're right. I mean,
yeah.
that's really interesting. Did you grow up with boundaries at all?
Mm, I mean, no, not really. I mean, setting them.
Yeah. I mean, or respecting them. Like I had neither or. There was no boundary. It wasn't like my family that it's just in general that wasn't something that society had. You either did something, you didn't, you thought about it, or you didn't. Like no one just thought about just communicating them and hoping that they're respected. We weren't like, at
Oh
least where I
yeah.
grew up, we didn't talk about these things.
Oh, of
This is a
course.
new generation thing, if you ask me.
So no, so I mean, I think boundaries are always there, or have always been there. The issue is that before we did not communicate. We
Yeah.
were in. I mean, I grew up where saying sorry was not like really big, so it was more like, okay, okay, I get it, like, and so
Mm.
setting boundaries, you would be like, ah, this guy, like,
You were
or
dramatic
whatever.
if you said it.
Yeah,
You would
yeah,
you would be the dramatic one, right?
yeah,
Yeah. That's
and
it's really interesting to me. I see my niece, like she very, very clearly says, like, don't do this, I don't like this, to all of us, to the whole family, to her older, like me being 20 something years older, or like my sister, like, I remember never being able to say those things, not in my family, like just in general, like with my friends, even, like, like it just, if I said it to one of my girlfriends, hey, I don't appreciate when you do this, they would be like, oh, you're so dramatic. Like it wasn't something we did. Whereas, exactly, you're right, it's communication. Like now, this generation, they really communicate to everybody. It doesn't matter age, whatever, who you are, what they're
Yeah.
okay with. Like I went to work and I had to accept whatever came my way. You didn't tell your boss this is how it's gonna be. Like it's just that wasn't something we communicated because exactly you would be like the dramatic weak one.
Yeah. And so you just had to like eat it up and hopefully like just be like, ah, yeah, like I don't like that, but whatever, you know? And it was always like brushing it off.
I find that like now that I'm learning to set them, and it's very, very hard for me. Like I still have a lot of fuck ups. Like I still don't always set them properly, or like 10 things happen before I can express it. But now that I'm learning a little bit more, the relationships I have with boundaries are such easier relationships. Like I always had to be so hard to communicate them, but now when I do communicate them, actually it's made everything easier. Like I have such an easy relationship with a girlfriend that I have in the last couple of years because she was very easy with expressing how she felt all the time. I don't like this. I do like this. I'm not okay with that. I am okay with this. And at first I was like, whoa, what the fuck? She's so like expressive. But now it's like so easy. Like because she's so expressive, I also don't feel as guilty saying no to her for certain things. And therefore I don't have any resentment towards her. And
Yeah.
I find that like I really didn't have that ability before. I would just cut people off. I would just stop being their friend. I would just stop dating them. Like, and even actually recently, I was going on a date with a guy. Before, like there were times where guys would come pick me up and they were half an hour late, and I just would block them and not go downstairs. That's how bad I was at communicating. And recently, I told this guy like, okay, I'm not late. I'm not a late person. And he at one said, oh, I'm almost at the restaurant, and he said I'll be there in 40 minutes. And I just said, don't bother. I left. And I didn't feel guilty for it. I actually feel like I expressed myself. I told him I don't appreciate people being late. He chose to be 40 minutes late. Instead of being childish and not sharing that and just leaving, I said, I'm really sorry, but don't bother. I expressed how I felt and I got up and
Yeah.
left. Now, maybe I was too harsh about it, but I felt I expressed myself and was completely disrespected. So I was okay without feeling guilty leaving. And he was like, I've already driven half an hour. I'm stuck in traffic. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. Like, that's how I feel about the situation. And I was really okay with that. Whereas before it was like almost dramatic because I didn't share it and then ignored the person and then blocked the person. And it just was not healthy the way that boundary was expressed.
Yeah. I get it.
It was just a
Yeah.
consequence. There was no, like you say, how you set them, like there was no communication. There was just consequence.
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
actually
And
I broke up with a lot of people that way over things.
yeah. And the thing is that the consequence needs to be shared with both parties. I mean,
Expressing it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but it like expressing it and, but also like, hey, Sherry, if this happens, these are the consequences. And you like, if I'm telling you, hey, if you break this boundary that I'm telling you and it's bothering me and you break it, these are the consequences. And if you are okay with that, then let's move on. And also I need to respect myself and say no to when you cross that boundary, or you know.
It's interesting because you just reminded me, and I know I've brought this up before. Like when I was 19 and I dated my first serious boyfriend, I was just such a free spirit. I had lots of guy friends. I partied a lot. And he very, very firmly in the beginning told me, no matter how drunk you get, I'm not okay with cheating at all. Even if you kiss somebody because you're drunk, I'm not going to accept it and I will break up with you. And we started
Mhm.
that relationship with that very clear understanding that, like, you could have all the guy friends you want, you can do whatever you want, but you can party all you want with them. But there's never ever going to be an acceptance where I'm going to be okay with you kissing someone else or doing anything with someone else for any reason, even if you say I'm drunk. And I always knew that boundary. And I always respected, because that concept, I didn't want to break up. So that consequence was very, very, and it actually was one of, it was great, because at that age, you don't really think about it. And I'm sure I would have been like, oh, whatever, I'm drunk. I would kiss someone and then be like, oh, brush it off. It's not a big deal. But he communicated it, gave me the consequence, and I knew, and I respected it throughout our relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the guy I dated after him, there were so many games from the very beginning. That boundary was never there. So we always were kind of like 1 foot out, 1 foot with somebody else. So
Yeah. And maybe if you had set boundaries, you're like, yeah, okay, I'll let it slide this time. Well, we should not let it slide. Like if it's something that's really affecting you, that eventually it could turn into something really big, you should not let it slide on
and
your side.
it did actually, because I remember he had guys nights every Friday and he would go out. And so the other one did too, but the other one always communicated that he had a girlfriend. He was always so open, honest. And this one, I asked him, I said, do you tell people you have a girlfriend? He's like, only if they ask. And I actually wasn't okay with it, but because I wasn't good at communicating my feelings and boundaries, I never said anything. And instead, every Friday when he went out, I resented him. But I wasn't self aware enough, emotionally mature enough to understand that was one of the things I resented him for. And
Yeah.
I did resent him. And but at the same time, I didn't express my boundary. He told me what he did, and I brushed it off and laughed it off,
Yeah.
and therefore then just went on just resenting him for it. So it is true.
Yeah.
It is true, and there was no consequence, like
Yeah.
said about it. I mean, ultimately, consequence was like a very destructive relationship, but it could have easily been avoided, just like it was avoided with the other one.
Correct.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
Good, good.
Good topic.
Yeah, I love the 7 things that you brought up. I never thought about those.
I mean, I
And
read them, so it's
it's
not
so
like,
good. You read them.
yeah.
But no, but they're interesting because they were like 7 things that you're allowed to set boundaries for yourself. That's what they were. And
Yeah.
I think I never thought that I could do a couple of those, like tell someone like emotionally I'm not available right now. That's something I never ever, even as we're setting these boundaries, I never ever considered that I could tell someone like right now emotionally I'm not available. It's a very interesting boundary. I didn't even knew I was allowed to do that, when of course there's times in my life I did need to do that.
Yeah. And like something that affects you is time, and it's there, like that is something that they need to respect, whoever is with you, that your time is important, and there's a boundary for that, you know.
Yeah, that boundary I was very well aware of.
I bet. I know.
I really can't, but
Yeah.
well, I mean, I think the ultimate thing is really finding somebody who you're, again, like we've talked about before, like foundations. And I think boundary is a foundation. Like finding someone with boundaries align. They don't have to be the same boundaries, but they have to have values where if you have a boundary, am I okay respecting it? And if I have a boundary, are you okay receiving it? Right. So
Yeah.
it's it's like finding someone with the boundaries you can work with, you know? They don't have to be the same. They just have to be ones that you can work within. Like I really, really can't be with someone who's sensitive and or doesn't appreciate their dirty laundry being aired, because I will do both. I will cross the line and I'll share your laundry. So it's just finding someone that aligns you.
Yeah.
Really good one. Oh,
True.
it's a hard one though, I tell you. I'm working on this one every fucking day.
We all, I think both of us are working on stuff like that, on our boundaries,
I
and
envy the
respecting. Yeah. Yeah.
I envy the younger generations. They're so good at it. They grow up with the ability to express themselves like and understand their feelings in ways that we never had that opportunity. You know,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I don't really envy them, but
well, they also have to do everything online, so I don't envy that. I would definitely rather have no boundaries and have these boundary issues than doing like nowadays. Like sometimes I want to pop off in public, and I'm like, oh fuck, there's probably cameras. Like I can't just say what I want to say, you know. Whereas like 20 years ago, I popped up everywhere, and I was like, yeah, who's gonna hear that, you know? So
I
these
know.
poor fucking kids and the things we did. Like man, I was wild at the clubs. These girls, like, these poor girls can't do fuck all, or guys, anything in the clubs anymore. It'll be
Yeah, no.
online.
Yeah. I think that's why like bullying is so bad right now because it just never goes away. It's
Oh no.
always gonna like they recorded you falling down the stairs and like and you're gonna be like remembered always.
And the
And
whole
so
world can comment on it. It's not just like
yeah,
your high school. It's like the entire world now has a way of commenting on this
yeah,
situation.
yeah. If
I
you did something dumb at school, by 2 days everyone had forgotten about it, or somebody had already done something else that they totally forgot of what you did, you know? And now it's
there so go ahead. Now it's just
no. So now it's always recorded, like so.
my niece sent me. I put up a really. I mean, I can't. I hate the fact that my nieces are on my Instagram because I cross the line with my jokes a lot. And I posted something, and it was like pretty like provocative but funny. And then she wrote to me, "Do you know what a digital footprint is?" I was like, "Fuck." Only, only a teenager would say that. Like, I'm okay with that digital footprint, but she is right. Like, I was like, yes, I know what it is. I just didn't grow up worried about it. Like, but I guess I
Yeah,
should be, but fuck, man.
yeah.
All right. Well, next week we're talking about lessons learned in your worst relationships.
Lessons learned in your worst relationships.
Mhm. I
Yeah,
think those are the
that's really
best
good.
relationships. I think, those are the
I
best
mean,
ones.
it's good, but it's a really good topic. You do learn a lot about it, but it's just remembering. You're like, oh, it wasn't. During that moment, it was bad.
I totally agree with you. At the time when I was going through my worst relationship, it was 10 years ago, and I was like devastated. But now it's my favorite relationship to talk about because it's so funny. Like someone asked me, they're like, "Oh, you don't mind talking about this at all? Like, is it because you still like them?" And I was like, "No, because I learned so much." So I love sharing that toxicity that I went through because 10 years later, I am a different person because of it, and I don't
Yeah,
have an emotional attachment to it. Like, there's no more hurt feelings about it. You know what I
of
mean?
course.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you're
You
right.
you
But in
you
the
grew out
moment,
of it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But in the moment, you're right. Oh my God, I cried all the fucking time. Like, just recently, one of my girlfriend was like, "Oh, like you've never had hardships." I'm like, "No." When I tell you about, she's like, "Yeah, but you always say it in such a positive way." And I'm like, "No, but because I don't." But back then, I cried about it. Like now, there's no
okay, okay. Don't
emotion.
don't share everything right now.
I won't. I won't. I
save
won't.
save some for next week.
All right. All right. Fine. All right.
Yeah,
So I will. I guess we should tell everyone follow us.
yeah.
The perfect
Follow
underscore
us
X.
on. Yeah, go. Sorry.
No, you go. I've been cutting you off all day today. You go.
No, I feel I've been cutting you off all day.
No, 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 no. So look at us. Look at
Okay.
us trying to respect each other.
Setting boundaries over here. Yeah, well, follow us at the perfect underscore X on Instagram. You can also email us at the perfect no underscore, just the perfect X at hotmail.com.
And thread. I keep trying to post something. I think I posted like 3 threads. It's the perfect
Um,
underscore X.
yeah. And
And
now
follow us on
Twitter
the
is,
podcast.
yeah. And now Twitter is only X or something like that. I was
It's
reading.
the perfect underscore X. The
No, no,
letter
no,
X.
Twitter. But Twitter now is now only X. I don't know if you heard
Oh,
about
they
that.
call it X?
Yeah, there was a change of name now. I think Twitter is not going to
What?
be Twitter anymore. I know. I was just reading about it today on Instagram. I
I never
guess,
used Twitter. I didn't know how to use it. But to change their name is just so stupid.
well, I don't know, but you'll read it about it. Look it up
I'll have
on
to.
on the
Put it.
web.
I'm gonna actually put that on my to-do list. I actually want to know. Not that I ever used it. I think I tweeted. Is that what you say? Like, yeah, I tweeted.
Yeah.
Look how fucking old I am. But I tweeted one time about the podcast, and we have it. But I mean, how many
Okay.
forms of social media do we need? Like, you know.
I know.
All
Okay.
right. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. Next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to
Bye.
us. Bye.